Hello and welcome to another edition of In the Trenches podcast. I'm your host, Seth, and today we have a very special guest. He's probably one of my favorite film critics, and his name is Armond White. As I said, he's a film critic for the National Review and Out. He was previously the editor of City Arts and the lead film critic for the alternative weekly New York Press and the arts editor and critic of the City Sun. Armand, it's great to have you with us on the podcast. Thank you for doing this.
Well, hello, Seth. Thank you for asking me. I'm flattered that you asked. Thank you.
Well, you're welcome. So I thought we'll talk a little bit. Of course, we're going to talk about your book, "Make Spielberg Great Again." However, I kind of want to talk to you about film criticism, and how you, um, you know, brought up in it, and how what made you kind of be a film critic, and also kind of just tell us what the job of a film critic, because I think today we kind of think it's one thing, and it's actually another. And what I mean by that is, when I was young, I always read, whoever it was, Roger Ebert or Richard Roper, or some of the probably more well-known film critics, and they always were telling folks what was entertaining about a film. And I think you, and others, actually trying to do something different, trying to bring out something more. And I was wondering if I'm, one, correct in that, and two, just kind of give the audience, what it is to be a film critic.
Well, we obviously have come at criticism from the perspective of different generations. So when I was a youngster coming up, um, film criticism was different than I think it is now. For example, you mentioned Ebert and Siskel. When I was coming up, it was a rare thing to see people talk about movies on television. But whenever they did, it was exciting to me because it was so rare. Well, because I was interested, but it was rare to see reviewers on TV. And I remember as I was coming up on the Today Show, they had a critic named Judith Crist. And I believe she used to do reviews every Friday. And I was always excited to see that because it was rare and because she would be talking about an art form that I loved. Since then, though, people discussing films in mainstream media, be it television, radio, or the internet, has become much more common. And as it has become more common, I think it's become less serious. So when I grew up and see those rare appearances, those semi-rare appearances, occasional appearances on TV by Judith Crist, that was also the period in which film criticism as a written literary or journalistic form was also different. That was the period of Pauline Kael, Andrew Sarris, John Simon, Stanley Kaufman, Dwight MacDonald, and reading those writers at that time, a time that was formative for me as a young person, it highly influenced what my perception was of what film criticism could be and how reviewing movies could be practiced. And that is the model that I followed because I admired what those people wrote, how they thought, their knowledge of film history, and the way they expressed their knowledge of film history, and the way they expressed their understanding of what film and what movies were as an art form. And like I said before, that's all changed now. It's all different now. Sarris, Kael, Kaufman, Simon, these are people who approached film criticism, or rather approached arts criticism, from the perspective of expertise. and the expertise is no longer valued these days. Now, anybody can be a film critic. And although that may be one's First Amendment right, I think, though, that the art form deserves expertise. It deserves to be approached and discussed by someone who cares enough about it to have studied it and to know what it is, who knows what film art is, and who also knows what writing and criticism is. And given those examples as a young person, those are the examples I have tried to follow.
Do you, I mean, you talk about that, and I kind of wonder because I've heard you on previous podcasts and others talk about the antagonism between the film critic and the actor or the director and such. But it seems like today there's more of an antagonistic relationship between the viewer and the film critic. I mean, I think you're a kind of a prime example. I see it all over Twitter and such, calling you a contrarian film critic, who just tries to write things to get people's attention. And so one could you can push back against what people say about you in just a second, but can you talk also about the antagonistic relationship it seems to happen more and more these days between the film critic and the viewer? Um,
Well,
and
yeah,
and tell us why, why that might be.
I think that that has more to do with the change in culture that I alluded to before. There was a period where film criticism was practiced more seriously, and that period's gone now. Um, I have blamed Roger Ebert for the destruction of film criticism. I still do, and what I mean by that is that Roger Ebert, unlike Judith Crist on the Today Show during the '60s, when Roger Ebert started reviewing on television, especially uh, every week, and eventually every week, sponsored and paid for by the Walt Disney Company, he lessened the standards of film criticism. Uh, he made it he made it seem that something that anybody could do. And though yes, everybody can discuss movies the same way they discuss sports, but when you discuss sports, you're not practicing the art of criticism, or you're not practicing art criticism, I should say. You're not discussing art when you talk about sports. You're talking about statistics and certain skills and favoritism, team favoritism and all that, and that's perfectly fine. But if one is talking about art, if one is talking as a critic, as someone involved with aesthetics and ideas, that demands more seriousness, more intellectual rigor. And seriousness and intellectual rigor is what Roger Ebert took out of criticism. And yet, because of his television broadcast, he made that popular. And this is we're talking generations ago now with the Ebert show. And as a result, we have generations growing up with the Ebert idea, which is not an idea of discussing films seriously. So you have generations who grew up with Ebert, and they don't know what criticism is. They think they do, but all they really know is they know how you talk casually about movies on television. They don't have an example of how you discuss film, art, or ideas seriously. So when they come across what I do, they don't know what to think. They think something's wrong with it. They think that I am being antagonistic because they simply don't have an idea in their heads of what real criticism should be. And they think that that is a problem. So there's a cultural change that we have to recognize here, and part of that cultural change also has to do with, I think, with social media and and the internet and the kinds of ideas that social media puts forth as acceptable in our culture. And one of those ideas is getting attention. I don't need to get attention because I've spent most of my adult life as a published journalist. I already got attention. I don't need to get attention. What I need to do, I feel what I need to do, is to respect the intelligence of my readers and my editors by saying things that are sensible, and informed. And it's not about trying to get attention, it's about trying to practice film criticism seriously, whether or not there are generations of people who even know what serious criticism is.
Do you I kind of wonder because I think maybe some people, and I'm not one of them, but they kind of look at your background, so to speak, in your published works. You're now with National Review. You were with the Alternative New York Press, and then the City Sun was also kind of this firebrand organization too. Um, is that partly why people look at you and say you're the contrarian who always just tries to go out of his way to um you know say something bad about a film or not? Is that partly why you think this happens on occasion? You're out there with these sort of um not so mainstream you know news organizations. Is
Yeah.
that part of a problem?
I think that's what is at issue here. When I'm aware that people put the contrarian label on me, but my response to that is, well, if I'm a contrarian, what's everybody else? What are the others? Can I play a game with you and ask you to answer that question? If I'm a contrarian, what are the others?
Yeah, well, there'll be the accepted view, I guess. The I would say the herd type of mentality of just going with the flow. That's what I would
Exactly,
call them.
exactly. That's what it is. Uh, at journalism school, the others would be what we call shills.
Yeah,
They are they exist to sell the movies. They exist as an arm of the publicity department. They don't exist as critics. And it's only those who are unwilling to accept that I practice this seriously. It's only those people who redefine what I do as contrarian rather than as criticism. It is I try to practice the critical profession. I try to deal with ideas. I try to deal with aesthetics and politics. I don't try to sell Hollywood. And there are a lot of people who don't understand that. But at the same time, they're not willing to admit that they are trying to do the opposite. They're trying to sell Hollywood. They're trying to be arms of the publicity department. They're trying to please herd mentality. They won't admit that. It's much simpler to say that I'm a contrarian as if I were doing something wrong. No, I'm practicing criticism. What are you doing?
right.
Face what you are doing before you label what I'm doing. And I think that's part of what's at issue here. People who are shills won't admit that they are shills.
Right.
I
Right.
There used to be I think a young something called a Young Critics Academy that was sponsored by the Film Society of Lincoln Center, and I was asked to speak to the group once, and uh, and so in that address, I asked them, "Why do you want to be film critics?" And one of the young people there said, "So I can tell people about good movies." And I said, "Well, criticism is more than telling people about good movies. Criticism is dealing with ideas. Criticism is practicing your study of film culture and film history. It's more than just telling people about good movies." I think the idea that being a critic is simply telling people about good movies, I think that comes from Ebert. I think that's part of the destruction and distortion that Ebert practiced, and so many people have that mistaken notion of criticism.
Is it also because, I mean, talk about film criticism and this idea of good movies? I mean, definitely the bar has kind of lowered, so there is no, and I hear it all the time that films are subject, like what you like and what you don't like is very subjective. And I feel like with your work, there is some sort of objectivity to it. There's a standard that you have, and I kind of wonder if that is at play when with the the people who write movies today, who are maybe popular today, is that there is no standard of good anymore. Um, is that also at issue here?
Yeah, I think so. Well, here, Seth. Here we go back to the idea of study
True.
and studying film history and knowing something about the subject, about the art form. Uh, I see a lot of movies where it seems to me that the person who made this film has no idea what they're doing. And the reason they have no idea is because probably they haven't seen enough movies. They don't know anything about the good work that has been done before them. They have no ideals to strive toward. Probably most of their ideas in what I see lately come from television rather than from the cinema. And a lot of filmmakers have no idea about the cultural heritage that they should be lining up with. And probably even fewer reviewers know anything about film history either. They only know the obvious popular mainstream titles, and maybe not even all of those. So that is a problem. Uh, in my background, starting out in my New York publishing career, writing for the City Sun, which is a black-owned political newspaper, I do have a particular perspective. Well, I always have my own perspective, but I started out writing for journalism that had a particular niche, and that's fine by me. I was happy to do it. City Sun was a great paper, and it made a great impact on New York City while it was published. I'm happy to do that, but I always write from my own perspective, as everyone does. But I'm also willing to admit it. A lot of reviewers don't admit it. They think they're just writing about movies, and they don't realize that there is a political aspect to everything they say and do, and so they're unable to admit that.
Gotcha.
But you can only write one. You can only write from your own perspective. You can only speak for your own taste, your own likes or dislikes. But thinking critically, I try to understand every work of art that I'm dealing with, and try to see what ideas are at play. Try to see what kind of and try to understand the aesthetics that are set before me, and and then I make the personal judgment of whether I like it or not. But I also think it's worthless to tell people as a critic to simply say I like it or I don't like it.
Right.
As a reader, I want more information than that. And Pauline Kael, Andrew Sarris, John Simon gave me more than just I like it or I don't like it. They could explain how a film works and could explain why they respond to it the way they do. And that's my objective.
That's something I think that has definitely been missed today as a student, I guess, of film criticism. I read you, Kyle Smith, both at National Review. I have a friend, Titus Teixeira, who has a podcast and talks a lot about film criticism, which I know you've been on the show repeatedly. And I think that I didn't realize until I started reading you and other people was that you're trying to explain an art and 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 explain it to the viewers in such a way to give it some depth, some meaning, and I think that's what I didn't realize until I started reading you. Is this like, oh, it isn't just about the plot or the story and telling whether it's good or not. There's some ideas being communicated here, and they have some meaning, um, and and you have done that, and it's why I like you so much, and I wonder why though. It seems like for you at least, there's some certain themes that you fix solely on. I mean, I don't know if that's the right word, but I notice you prize a lot of humanist type films in your work. Of reading the press gang, I noticed when you wrote about um, Amistad or even AI, both Spielberg films I know, but um, they you always hit on this like this humanist theme that I think Spielberg was talking about maybe in some of these films. And I was wondering if that's due to your background, what where you worked, um or if it's something else that you s- that you feel when you're watching some of these more humanistic films. And tell me if I'm wrong or not.
Well, that's fine. I think it comes down to what you want from art. And what I want from art is an understanding of what it means to be human. And that means some sympathy with the human condition and an understanding of what it means to be a human being in the world. And you can call that humanist. I I often call it humanist filmmaking because that's one of the terms that describes how 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 a filmmaker, how an artist approaches the ideas they're going to work with, the stories they're going to tell. Uh, Humanist used to be a good word.
Right.
Now I think it probably has lost some repute because the culture has changed and there's we might be living in a less humane, less kind world where people are not understood, their humanity is not understood, their humanity is simply always judged. And I prefer works of art that deal sympathetically with human experience.
Right.
I call that humanist. And Spielberg isn't the first. D.W. Griffith did it. Uh, I think Renoir did it. Uh, von Sternberg did it. All Dreyer did it. All the great filmmakers do that. All the great artists do that. And the idea of humanist art is something that's lost in our politically correct age, where people are expected to be perfect, where they're expected to do the right thing all the time. And it's gotten to this horrible point today now where some people say they only want to see a reflection of themselves, see themselves represented rather in works of art, rather than understanding, rather than trying to understand how they are like other people. And understanding humanism is key to that. Uh, so, yeah, yes, I'm looking for works of humane sympathy.
Okay. Okay. I come from, I guess I come from, because I'm going to college and come from this philosophy of humanism being something totally atomistic, in a way, and a kind of a debasement, I guess you can say, of humanity. And so seeing the way you put it, sheds a little different light. But I want to get to your book because I know, that's partly why you're here. You wrote a great book, Making Spielberg Great Again. And I thought I'll start with just asking a simple question, which is, why did you write a book about Spielberg? There's a lot of different directors, um, and in a way, I mean, if I mean, you're so out of the ordinary that I was thinking, a book for about, maybe Terrence Malick might have been, something because he's sort of out there too. But instead you picked a popular director. Why?
I'm going to answer it this way. I grew up as an American kid, and I like Hollywood when it's good. I like popular art when it's good. I grew up in Detroit, the home of Motown Records. I like popular culture. Uh, Popular works of art seem to me that a popular work of art has already proven that its ability to communicate with people, its ability for people to elicit feelings from lots of people, from many people, from a wide audience, and this is a good thing. And one of the wonders of popular music and popular film is that being popular does not preclude being artful, being artistic, being intelligent, and being taken seriously. And Spielberg is not the first. He is simply one of the filmmakers who can be taken seriously at the same time as reaching a wide popular audience. A popular audience, popular not just demographically or ethnically or in terms of gender or race, but also in terms of age. Spielberg's movies are able to communicate to people who are young or old from many different backgrounds. And this is one of the wonders of cinema as a popular art form. And that's why. That's why. Spielberg does not have to make capital S serious movies, or I should say, quote, serious, unquote movies in order to make serious art. Terrence Malick makes quote serious unquote movies, and that's fine. Some of them are beautiful. Uh, but Spielberg makes serious movies even while making what many people think of only as entertainment. And I was happy to write this book because I wanted to emphasize that idea that entertainment movies could also be serious works of art. And I think that for over the first half of Spielberg's career, he did that time in, time out.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a fan of Spielberg. I mean, I watched, Jurassic Park when I was a kid, E.T. and some of that stuff. And w- what struck me is Spielberg is definitely a sentimental director, and
Mm-hmm.
it's, I think E.T. is probably my favorite Spielberg film, and I connected deeply to Elliot. The fact that he comes from a broken home and he's lonely and trying and feeling this alienation and trying to, I guess, find a friend as he's going through this tough time. I felt that, but I kind of wonder, because there's a lot of people, I think, especially when it comes to ET, that there's such a thing as being too sentimental. Do you think that Spielberg is falls into that category, or no?
Oh, not at all. But I do think that as a lot of people age and consider themselves, as they grow to consider themselves intelligent, that they become embarrassed by emotion, and they don't like to feel emotion, and they certainly don't like to admit that they feel emotion. You could also say they don't want to admit they're human. But this is one of the great things about art. I think you said that you felt ET deeply.
Yes.
It's a beautiful thing. That's what you want. And I think feeling deeply or having deep feelings in response to a work of art scares a lot of people because I think they feel that it admits weakness. It doesn't admit weakness, it admits humanity. And a lot of people don't understand the difference. And and perhaps it does to some degree admit weakness or maybe admits vulnerability. That's part of being human. And a lot of people, and certainly a lot of people who pretend to write criticism, they like to pretend that they are smart and tough, and and they are ashamed of emotion. They're ashamed of feeling. They're ashamed of sentiment, and that's their problem. But they should not project that problem onto Spielberg's artistry, which is to say, they should not demean or cheapen Spielberg's artistry because he goes after an emotional response. That's what you want from works of art. You don't want to. What's the point? What's the point of indulging in any work of art if you don't feel something in response to it? Whether film, literature, or music, it's got to make you feel something, or else it's not working. Something is wrong with it. And a lot of people have not come to that realization, or they're just ashamed to. They're not educated enough to realize it.
Or is it that, I mean, this is something I've at times I like with ET and some of the other movies. At some point, I think sometimes people think like I did. Well, am I losing my objectivity about a certain person or a certain director? Um, uh, e- Sometimes I maybe and this is totally um a question you don't have to answer, but is sometimes it seems like there's you don't want to fall in that fanboy category. And sometimes when it comes to maybe Spielberg or or a certain movie about Spielberg that you're so even though you feel deeply about it, like I did with ET, can you use that object lose that objectivity? Um, is that you know?
Well, objectivity is something that reporters should aim for. But as a viewer, you don't have to be objective about anything. You feel what you feel. You are who you are. Uh, as a person who, with education, as a person who tries to articulate their ideas and feelings, uh, that's all you need to do. Be able to articulate them, try to understand them better, and that's sufficient. There's nothing wrong with having an emotional response to a movie or to a work of art. That's part of the beauty of the art form. Uh, that's that, to me, that's what it's all about. You don't have to be, you can't be, in that sense, when you're dealing with art, objectivity is a lie. You are who you are, you respond to the things that move you, that touch you, that affect you for multiple reasons. And as a person of intelligence, I say that you ought to want to figure out what those reasons are, but that doesn't stop you from having your response. Uh, Having a response and being able to recognize why you're responding uh, doesn't mean you've lost objectivity. You, you can still understand and articulate your responses, and there's nothing wrong with that. Objectivity is for reporters. It's not for art audiences.
Okay, okay. So I mean, so that's just one of the reasons I liked Spielberg, and you go through in your book talk about the color purple, Amistad. I think the more surprising um uh, uh film review or essay film essay was about Munich and how you thought that he just transformed into another level. Spielberg did, and so you talk about his early art for the most part pretty um, persuasively, and also like he was going up to different heights, so to speak, in art. And then when it gets about I forget where you pinpoint, but then Spielberg kind of goes down a little bit in your view estimation. Um, and so I was kind of wondering what kind of changed your mind about Spielberg, um, that or rather, did you change or did Spielberg change his films? Um, and that's why you decided to make the provocative statement of making Spielberg great again.
Well, it's 2020, and the world has changed, and evidence of that can be found in Spielberg's work. His movies after War Horse are different from the movies he made before War Horse, and one needs only look at the kinds of films he made after War Horse, and it's easy to see what probably influenced that change in him, and that the change was indeed political. And that's the change that I have noted in Spielberg's work. That's the change on which the concept of this book hinges upon. His change, and the change is primarily a political change. It's a change that's altered the way he has depicted human experience in recent films, and the way he has viewed world history and American history in his recent films. There has been a political change, and I've taken note of it as a viewer and as a critic. And this change is so so radical in one of our formerly great filmmakers that I felt it needed to be dealt with. I wanted to explain it as best I could, and as best I could meant going film by film and offering it in the context of his entire career. And that's why. Uh, yes, it's a political notion. Make Spielberg Great Again comes from President Trump's great motto, Make America Great Again. I would like America to be great again. I would like Spielberg to be great again as he was. And the necessity for that comes from the change that has happened in our culture in the past few years.
Is it just that he's gone too politically correct in a way, or is it? I mean, I'm just trying to decipher what the political thing was. Was it just that he's gone uh too? I mean, I don't want to say left wing, but um uh is it that he's gone too um woke in a way, like as the, because it seems to me that Hollywood has definitely embraced the Me Too, um the uh w- wokeness of, so to speak, but like a critical race theory and some of that stuff of here's what a actor or actress can or cannot play, that sort of thing, because of their ethnicity and or whatever. Is that what you're talking about, or is there something different or more deeper at play?
Well, the book is divided into four parts. And one part is America. And these four parts have to do with key ideas in Spielberg's art. Uh, one part is America and the world. Uh, one part deals with how the importance of his creating The Color Purple in 1985 and his films and the culture after that. And another part of the book, the fourth part of the book, called Obama. And it's quite apparent that the change in Spielberg's filmmaking has a lot to do with the advent of Barack Obama and ideas about race, sex, faith, America, politics, uh, morality. Those things have changed as a result of Obama's appearance on the scene, and those changes are evident in Spielberg's movies. The change has not been for the good. Where Spielberg once made humanist films, as we discussed before, films that were sympathetic to the human condition, that understood its characters' needs for faith and its characters' needs to relate to and understand other people. Beginning with Lincoln, all that changed. And I noted it in my review of Lincoln, which is in the book. Uh, a year, almost a full year after my review of Lincoln, uh, the critics at the New York Times wrote an article a year later saying, "Wow, Lincoln is really about Obama." I mean, I saw it first, but that's not necessarily a great insight on my part because it seemed to me to be obvious that the film Lincoln was actually an analogy to Barack Obama. And it was an analogy that took in a brand new, much more cynical idea about America, about politics. And that change has been evident in all the Spielberg films that were made since Lincoln. And these ideas, it's not so much that they embrace political correctness and the Me Too movement and Black Lives Matter, but they embrace what's come to be seen more and more now as communist and socialist ideas about society. And these are ideas that I reckon come from Spielberg's collaboration with the screenwriter of Lincoln, who is the avowed communist Tony Kushner. So that is the change that has taken place in Spielberg's career, and that is the change from his former greatness that I think he needs to get back to.
Yeah, I actually one of my last questions was going to be, what does need what how can we make, or well, how can Spielberg come back to that greatness? You mentioned Tony Kushner. Maybe he doesn't need to work with him anymore and be more get back to his um sympathetic nature of humanity. Um, but is that enough? I mean, or does he? I don't know. Like, does he have to get away from the culture that Hollywood has now, become in a way, or you know,
It would be enough. I say it would be enough. For starters, it would be enough. What he would have to go on to do, though, is not simply question ideas that he gets from his collaboration with Kushner, but also question the ideas that he seems enamored of about Barack Obama. As I said before, ideas about America, about race, about faith, about history, about morality. Those ideas changed from the humanist principles of the early part of Spielberg's career into something entirely different. After Obama, the world doesn't think the same about race and faith and morality anymore. Those are the ideas that Spielberg would have to work through, I suggest, to get back to his former greatness. Just as those are ideas that America has to work through to get back to its former greatness.
gotcha. Okay, okay.
And again,
Well,
this is always, in America, as in Spielberg, it's always it's a potential and it's a promise. It's a rather it's a faith-based potential. Uh, it would be beautiful to see Spielberg make movies as great as he used to, rather than the not great films he's made in the past four or so outings. Uh, I trust and hope that he's got it in him still. He's still got it in him to move audiences and to affect one's thinking as powerfully as he had done in Close Encounters and War of the Worlds and The Color Purple and Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade and Amistad and those great films.
okay. Okay. Well, I don't want to take too much more of your time, Armand. It's been wonderful to talk to you. I've learned a lot, and I thought a lot about film criticism lately, and so you've definitely been helpful in that regard. Um, Thank you so much again for coming on the
Thank
show.
you.
I appreciate it.
I'm pleased to talk to you about it.
And
Thank you for asking.
you're welcome. Please find Armond White's book, Make Spielberg Great Again. It is a great book, and people should go out and buy it.
All right. Thank you, Seth.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
You too.